Hello everyone, my name is Jada Goldborn, and in this section we will be focusing on amplifying voices. This is where we will illuminate the untold stories of linguistic disparities within the African American community, particularly in the realm of education and criminal justice. In this journey through time, we will explore real life narratives, shedding light on the challenges faced by individuals whose voice have been silenced by linguistic disparities in the criminal justice world. So, as a class, we will go through the journey of creating 4 different segments, which students will make either individually or in groups. When the time comes, we will discuss that regarding different time periods of linguistic disparities regarding language and criminal justice. So, to briefly give you guys a view on the 4 segments that you will be expected to complete, will be segment 1. Here we will research and discuss about the historical roots. The timeline will be roughly between the 1960s and 1980s. We'll revisit the civil rights era and a period which was marked by both progress and systematic challenges faced especially by African Americans who faced many different language barriers, and which those barriers have caused them to be in criminal situations regarding being locked up, being fined, being arrested, being physically beaten, and many other things by justices who are supposed to protect us. As African Americans during this time period fought for equality, linguistic biases persisted in educational institutions, which helped shape the narrative around the intelligence and capability of African Americans as a whole and their language. We will be using real stories from this era to reveal the struggles of students, in particular, whose unique experiences have shaped their lives within the linguistic culture and their experiences with criminal situations regarding police and other means. So, in our next segment that students will have to complete during this timeline will be the Ebonics controversy. This timeline is roughly around the 1990s, particularly 1996. Fast forwarding to this time, Ebonics had a very big controversy, which was brought along linguistic disparities to the forefront. Students will have to dive into real life accounts from this period, exploring the impact of policy decisions made by Congress and different higher ups on African American students who spoke African American English, also known as AAVE, which we will dive into more regarding AAVE and its impact on criminal justice and criminal experiences which were faced by African Americans. Interviews with educators and community leaders will also help students provide insights into the complexities surrounding language, education, and cultural identity, allowing for them to dive deeper and to pull out stronger and more resourceful information that will help them during this part. Segment 3 of this project that students will be facing will be the school to prison pipeline. A section has been covered about the school to prison pipeline. So, with that, students can also use what I have provided them on the website to kind of help narrate what they want to look at and how they want to kick off this part of their podcast and segments. So, the prison pipeline's time period would more be surrounded around the 2000s and present time currently. So transitioning into the 21st century, we as students and professor will confront the stark reality of the school to prison pipeline. This is a phenomenon that disproportionately affected African American students greatly, meaning that a lot of African American students don't have the particular resources that others of other races consider articulate or proper. So a lot of times the way African Americans may express themselves or speak or act in school is not because of being delinquent or, acting out or, being looked at differently, but it's a way of how African Americans express themselves and how they carry themselves in society rather than how society wants them to be. And a lot of times, more than normal, schools see this as a pipeline for students to be kicked out of school, to be suspended, to be expelled. And with these type of actions will cause for students to fall into a hole and a repeat of starting to commit criminal offenses, start to, commit things that will land them in prison because they weren't given a chance and they weren't looked at as people who have a different culture of speaking, of language, and many other things. So students will, this is the most important part because it will show how African American students aren't given the chance of language, and because that there is that language barrier between so many African American students at such a young age, they aren't given a chance, which leads many African Americans to ending up in prison or having a criminal, history and many offenses. So that is the biggest part of the podcast. And the fourth and final podcast that students will produce will be resilience and empowerment. Now, this will be a podcast surrounded around how African Americans have fought through the linguistic disparities that has been brought to them by other races. This final segment, as I said, will highlight the stories of resilience and empowerment. Interviews with educators, again, activists, and students will showcase the initiatives that challenge linguistic injustices and disparities in education. These voices will amplify the importance of embracing linguistic diversity, meaning that this will help for society as a whole to understand African Americans more who face linguistic disparities because of the way they speak or because of the way they have been taught. And a lot of times, more than none, the way that African Americans talk or express themselves lands them with lesser opportunities or lesser, situations to help grow them because of their language. Helping to foster an environment for linguistic disparities that African Americans are faced by, African American students can thrive academically without, sacrificing their culture and, linguistic identities. So without students having to put on a face that they aren't, being forced to talk or express themselves in ways that are not for them. So with this segment, students are, have the responsibility of finding real life stories or even going out and interviewing, if they can, people who have faced linguistic disparities in education and maybe even people who have faced injustices that have landed them in the criminal justice scene, that have faced, situations by police or by the prison system or jail. So students will be responsible for, finding this information. So in these podcasts, well, as I should say, as a whole, amplifying voices will call to action. Through these podcasts, we will hope to inspire change within the linguistic disparities and linguistic injustices, fostering understanding, allowing for other races who may not understand AAVE or, African American talk or slang or language as not being something that is ghetto or something that is, looked down upon, but a way of culture, a way of embracing who we are coming from, a way of reclaiming the history that has been, so hardly been trying to be erased by other, races or people of power. This will also help for educators and policymakers and, communities to champion linguistic equity in African American education, because as African Americans, we are looked down more when it comes to education, or when it comes to, finding jobs or holding higher positions, because of, the basis of the color of our skin and the way that we may talk and the way that we may portray ourselves. With these podcasts, it will ensure that every voice is not only heard but celebrated within the halls of education and criminal justice and beyond, in other aspects of life and sections that people may want to cover when, talking about or, expressing linguistic disparities and injustices. So I welcome you guys to be creative with this. You don't have to just stay in a box or to have to use certain things. Reach out, can you use this, or can you implement this type of, information into this podcast? And I'm pretty sure you can. So as students as a whole, I want us all to come together, create some podcasts that have meaning, that, fight against linguistic disparities, and that will help us as African Americans and our language that has been looked down for so many years upon as something greater than it already is. So let's dive into it and create some podcasts that are meaningful and that have empowerment behind them.